Day 2 in quarantine. Liv and I today, we now have our mats in our house, and we're going to go through how to improve in jiu-jitsu, or a certain aspect of how to improve your jiu-jitsu even when you're not able to train. Okay, so it's a pretty difficult task. I do believe you can improve even if you're not training. That said, we're assuming here that you don't have the most important part of jiu-jitsu, which is being able to actually roll and work with a partner with resistance, or even drill.
Or even, you might not even have mats.
Yeah, you might not even have mats. So,
which, by the way, MA1 do great jigsaw mats. We got our delivery today. Super quick. You can get 20 or 40 mil ones, so you can arrange that through MA1 and Absolute as well.
Yeah. So yeah, you don't have a partner, so it's obviously that's the main way you improve. But I think you got to look at it as if, like, really, I think you improve like from a technical point of view when you understand what it is you're meant to be doing. Like, often it is the improvements come like, oh, I was meant to put my grip here, I was going to block that grip, and then I take this grip, and that's going to improve my jiu-jitsu. Or it could be a broad understanding, a new concept or something that you could be working on. So that's actually often where the improvement occurs from like a mental point of view, and then you need to actually train it with resistance to actually implement that. So when I say I think you can improve your jiu-jitsu without actually training, I don't think like the first time you get on the mat afterwards you're suddenly going to be better. But you might have a better understanding of jiu-jitsu, and it's going to make it a lot quicker. You'll get a more rapid improvement once you hit the mat again. But we're probably not going to be going too much into that. I believe for that there's a few things you can do when you're not able to actually use a partner to troubleshoot and so on. And I think that's like watching a lot of competition footage. Try to put yourself in the competitor's shoes and think like, what would I do in that situation, and why is that working, why is that not working? Like, watch heaps of competition footage, obviously instructional series as well, where you can get an idea of hopefully whoever's delivering the instructional kind of gives an idea of the main problems you might encounter when you're trying to do one of the whatever topic they're covering, and how you go about solving them. So by the time you get into training, you kind of know what you're meant to do. It's then about being able to, as I said, train that in a live setting. You can visualize, so you can imagine you're in the scenarios, like, if you're watching an instructional or some comp footage, and try to put yourself in there. You can even close your eyes as you do it and kind of go through how you're going to react to certain scenarios there. I think that's really important. And then there's some like solo drills as well. I'm not going to go through them today. There are some, we might get through them a little later. There are some solo drills you can do. I personally think they're a little overrated in terms of their utility. Like, they're good if you've got nothing else you can do them, but in the end, movement without a partner is going to feel quite different to jiu-jitsu. So I would much rather you understand jiu-jitsu better in your time off than necessarily become good at moving with no partner around.
I would actually suggest to like really bribe people you live with, like, so either family members or other housemates that might be in isolation. Perfect time to start jiu-jitsu. So like, cook them dinner so they become your drill partner, and then they become obsessed and they love it.
That's a very good idea. Yes.
Bribery.
But actually I think one area I think you can actually improve more so in particular is in your athletic potential, and there's probably two things we can talk about there. One is improving like your strength and power and your cardio and your physical attributes in terms of that, which I'm not really going to go into. And the one I will go through today is stretching and improving your flexibility and active range of motion, because I think that you can actually improve. If you spend a lot of time doing this, you will actually come back to jiu-jitsu, assuming you haven't lost like some of your timing and so on. You'll actually come back to jiu-jitsu better with a larger degree of you'll end up with a larger repertoire of skills or techniques available to you because you can now move your body in ways that it couldn't move before. So you can actually improve your jiu-jitsu by improving your flexibility. It's something I've worked on a lot in the last 6 months. I've been focusing very heavily on guard retention, along with Ari Tabak, who's I never say his last name right, so yeah, but Tabak.
I don't know.
A very good black belt. He's got such a hard guard to pass. I've been working his style of guard retention and trying to implement that in my game, and I feel like
and his partner Hope as well.
Yes, she's very good too.
Can't pass the guard. Maybe after this.
And since the last 6 months, since ADCC, it's been a big focus for me, guard retention, and I feel like my guard retention's improved heaps. And so the stretches I'm going to show will prime you as well towards some material at some point that I'll release on guard retention, but along with Ari actually, so that'll be really good. But I strongly suggest start stretching and do it regularly after training. We're going to go through the rationale behind a bunch of the stretches we do, and then at the end I'll kind of talk about what the stretches are and why I'm doing them, and then at the end I'll actually do a stretching session. So in case you want to use this video as like a one you can go back to, instead of sitting through me talking like this again, you can kind of fast forward to the point where we do like a bit of stretching at the end. All right, and you can kind of do that along with us.
Sounds good.
All right, so alright, before we talk about the individual stretches and range of motion, I just want to talk about two things. The first is what type of, there's different ways to stretch. You can do like PNF stretching or static stretching, and people will tell you all sorts of different things, and I've read the research on it, and basically from what I read, which I couldn't find anything that had said to the contrary, which is basically it doesn't matter what type of stretch you do, they all produce pretty similar types of results. So whatever you prefer or feel like, obviously in the immediate short term, the PNF stretches tend to give you a greater improvement in range of motion, but there's some pretty good research showing that's not necessarily the passive tissues that you think you're stretching that are actually lengthening with that. It's usually like it's a slightly different mechanism, so it doesn't mean that the next day that it's necessarily going to have had any greater effect than doing a static stretch. So then the other question is like duration, and again the actually, to be honest, the research on this is really poor. So if anyone wants to do a good research project on stretching and what the best type is to improve range of motion, there's probably actually a lot of potential for that. So, but anyway, how long do you stretch for? Again, there's no great evidence to guide this. We know to produce what they call creep deformation in the tissues, which is basically not just like there's kind of elastic. You can if you do like a quick, I lift my leg up and back down, it kind of like an elastic band. It kind of stretches and pulls back in, whereas creep deformation is kind of like if you stretch it and hold it, and the actual within it stretches within the muscles, it'll stretch a bit more, and when you let go, it doesn't come back to that same original shape. Just like an elastic band, you kind of hold it open for a while instead of just like a quick pull. It'll often take some time to get back to its original shape. So there's definitely some evidence that if you're going to stretch, you might as well do it for some period. They say at least 30 seconds, at least from what I know of that. So for me, I've been stretching after class around about 1 minute per stretch, and I've noticed improvements in my range of motion quite considerably. You have to do it consistently, but it's literally once a day. I've been doing it for 1 minute per muscle group, and it has improved my range of motion. I do believe if I did it 10 times a day, it probably would have been a lot faster, but that also requires
this is purely anecdotal, but I was a gymnast for 10 years, and we did stretch on average an hour to an hour and a half every single day. So I am flexible in some ways, not always in the jiu-jitsu ways, but I wasn't a flexible kid, so we actually did stretch. It's a little bit easier when you're young, but we did stretch for at least an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours every single day, and we held each stretch for up to 10 minutes. We also cried a lot, but when you do that, you get more flexible. So I think you just have to do it just like anything else, put the time into it. Now is the perfect time if you have nothing else to do.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so the longer you want to do it, the better. I would personally, my opinion is I would rather stretch for 1 minute 5 times a day than for 5 minutes once a day.
Why?
Because you're looking, the real thing you want is adaptation. So if you're stretching, allowing some creep deformation, and then a little bit of time passes and then you're stretching it again. Therefore, instead, like basically, if you stretch once a day for about 1 to 2 hours of the day, you've had a muscle that's slightly longer, or tissue, or capsule, or whatever you're stretching, and then for 22 hours of the day, it's at its normal length. Right?
Yeah.
Even if you did a 5-minute stretch or a 10-minute stretch, whatever you did, but
I mean,
if you do it 5 times a day, then it
gymnastics
can
is not
spend.
a good example for that, because I did train twice a day and we did stretch all the time.
Yeah, and then there's actually two. The other one is a lot of things are neural stretches, and they're often limited not necessarily by passive tissues such as ligaments or muscle. They can often be more limited by pain due to your nervous system, and often the improvement in your range of motion is not from your tissues getting longer, but your nerves' tolerance to the stretch, which is obviously another factor to that. So sometimes you just get used to the pain of stretching, and that actually allows you to stretch it further, essentially. All right, so enough talking. Let's go through some of the ranges that I think are important for jiu-jitsu. They're not necessarily in order of importance, but in some degree, yes. The first one is hip external rotation. So that's the ability to turn your knee outwards and your foot towards you like this. Okay, so that's actually my hip rotating like this. Okay, and this is a really important action in jiu-jitsu. Obviously, if someone's passing my guard, if someone's passing your guard out on this side, you want to be able to try to bring your foot back in front of your opponent. Okay, obviously if I don't have that flexibility, I can't do it, right? So being able to bring your foot back in front and then use that to make distance and recover. Okay, maybe we'll show that now if you want to go on this side. So a good example here, lift starts to pass, and if I can bring my foot in front, keeping my knee out and foot in. Obviously, if your knee has to come in, which is not hip external rotation, this is not a good angle to bring my foot back. Okay, so I really need to have your knee out with your foot coming back in, and that's going to be a great way to
just move forward and
recover.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, do you want to keep it? Sorry, I'll just check the camera. One other thing I wanted to talk about is passive and active range. So, because this actually is important, you can often be flexible but not necessarily functionally flexible. We're going to see an example in a moment actually, but actually we'll go through it now. For example, with my active range, if I try to put my foot to my head, I can't do it, okay? Which could be a real limiting factor. If I'm trying to frame and bring my foot to recover my guard, I can't bring it any closer to my head than this, right? But at the same time, if Liv's trying to pressure around my guard, let's say she's coming around from here and she's pressuring like this, and my foot comes in front, keep pressure. Like I can pretty much touch my head with my foot. So that's my passive range. I don't have to do anything. If I grab my foot, I can pull it to my head nice and easily, okay? But I can't do that of my own accord. So that's an active range, which I need to work on, as you can see, compared to my passive range, which is actually quite good for this action, okay? And I can use that to recover, okay? Right, so that's our first motion we're looking at actually, is going to be external rotation of the hip, so being able to turn our knee outwards and our foot coming inwards like this, okay? So we move this way. Let's say someone's going to pass your guard, being able to bring your foot across and knee outwards is going to allow you to recover compared to having your foot here, right? How do we stretch that? Usually we're going to put our, for me it's usually, I should just clarify this, because I think people stretch this somewhat wrong. You really do want your knee on the outside and foot coming like across, usually almost towards the near shoulder here. It's not usually that I'm trying to reach across body like this. Okay, so when I actually show that from here, like if someone's passing and they might have their like head here, I almost want to be able to come like back and across here like this, as opposed to like the foot moving over here in space. It's almost too late. Okay, so when we actually look at that as a stretch, I don't want to be going like with my foot across my body. I see people doing like
midline.
Yeah, or even not necessarily across the midline, but I see people going here and stretching like this. I really like to have the foot like going towards my outer shoulder. Okay, I'm bringing my shoulder down towards that foot. Okay, it's harder, and don't twist sideways. Try and keep your shoulders facing downwards. Okay, so I'm trying to get my chest to the ground pretty much here. All right. So I recommend you stretch that external rotation passively, and actively as well would be just like on your back. You know, you can put your hand wherever you want, and each day try to get it a little bit further back, and try to touch your hand like so, keeping your knee out and foot back. Looks kind of weird, right?
American.
All right. Next is your hamstring. So again, this will come up in a few different times in jiu-jitsu when it's useful. We have something we call a high pummel. That Liv might be, which very important guard retention movement, but Liv might be holding onto my leg. And if I have flexible hamstrings, which is bringing my knee towards my chest and my foot backwards, I can start to circle around her arm. Okay, so hold my leg tight. Yeah. If I go up, back, I can circle around because my hamstrings are flexible. All right. If I don't have that flexibility in the hamstring, hold it again, and I just try to go across from here. She is pinning and she's turning my legs away. This is a real problem. Okay, so we're going to work out our hamstring flexibility quite a lot. So how do we stretch? Actually, that's one example.
Really useful in spider guard.
Yes.
I think more flexible people are drawn to spider guard, but you pretty much can't be good at spider guard without good hamstring flexibility.
But Liv's very good with this. Actually, she will be able to get her grip and pull me forward using her hamstring. See that? If she can't if she can only straighten her hamstring to here, she'll actually push me backwards this way. She wants to pull me forward over the top, and she can use her hamstring to do that. And also hamstring, or basically the splits action, will be useful for dealing on top with X guards and so on as well. So Liv's in about X guard. I will often face my opponent now that I'm a bit more flexible this way. I'll face, keep my weight forward. It's very hard for Liv to get up, and I can use that to start to almost do the splits as I try to pass this way. Okay, it's very hard for them to drive up with that. Without that hamstring flexibility, I have a more narrow stance. It's hard to drive back into Liv. When I can start to drop through and come forward into this splits, it starts to make it a lot worse for the person on top. So, how do we stretch our hamstring? Well, I like to do two stretches for this, because I think you want to basically be able to stretch your, I say hamstring, it's often your sciatic nerve here, so you can have your leg, keep your knee straight, foot pulled back, and reaching towards your toes here. Even if you grab your toes and start to straighten your leg, you should feel there's more of your knee than your actual hamstring itself. Okay, and extending like so. Okay, we can hold that, or you can use a belt. This is going to show, so we can, if you're struggling to reach, then you can use two hands on the belt, get your legs straight, and pull back towards your head as much as you can. Here, make sure you're like in the right plane. So see my other leg's facing upwards. You shouldn't be like falling to the side as you do this. I want you to face straight up with your non stretching leg as well. Okay, but you really want to be at least flexible enough to to reach your hand right over your toes. So if you're here and you're struggling to reach your toes, that's a big problem. Really, you should be able to get to here. You're struggling?
Yeah.
All right. Stretch your. It's probably your hip extension on your left leg to a big degree. All right. And that's your sciatic nerve. So let's see that. Go back. This is the difference here because she's not pulling her toes back. She's able to go a lot further. With the sciatic nerve, it's a lot less. Okay, but you can still reach your toes, but yeah, it's harder with two hands than one as well. All right, so that's the straight leg, straight leg raise essentially. But we also have a hamstring stretch, which is going to be more on the hamstring itself. And I like to do that in combination with a hip flexor stretch. So we try to do the splits. We can kind of target both of them at once. Okay? So come up to here, and I'm dropping my hips down. See my knees a bit more bent. You can even point your toes if you want. You should feel this a lot more in the hamstring belly if your knees bent and your toes are pointed, but you're still trying to drop your hips and extend it. When I say knee bent, not like this, right? Just like kind of bent and knee and toes pointed. It takes pressure off the sciatic nerve and allows the hamstring to drop down a bit. Obviously, if you're very good at this, eventually, I can't do the full splits yet, but I'm working on it. You might be able to, hopefully by the end of my quarantine, I can. Then you will eventually have your knee straight as you drop down.
I am for the flexible people. I don't know if I can do it anymore because I used to be flexible, but you can do the splits without a problem. You can actually prop your front leg up onto something. So I used to do it off a chair. Let's see if I can do it maybe off a foam roller. Just, there you go. And you can stay there for a while. So I feel a really big hamstring stretch in there.
For the 1% of people that can.
I just like doing this because this is one thing that I'm better at Lockie than Lockie at the one thing.
Yeah, very good. Well done.
Thanks.
I'll get there. I'm aiming to beat you. Alright. Hip flexion. So, hip flexion is the ability to pull your knee to your chest. Okay, in this direction. Now, obviously, most people can get it to their chest, but in reality, we want to be able to bring our knee kind of past it, underneath our shoulder. Often, this will allow us to recover from some positions such as north-south. And it can make it difficult for the person to get under to pass the guard as well. So obviously a lot of the benefits of flexibility are going to come from guard passing scenarios. So if I pull my knee back towards my shoulder here, that's hip flexing, right? Coming down here, okay? And the better you are with that, the more likely you are to be able to recover from a position. Maybe go into north-south lift. So lift my be a north-south. Yep. And I'm just managing to frame here. If I can drop my knee under my shoulder, I can bring it in front of her shoulder and then use that to start to recover my guard and escape. Okay, now, how do we stretch that? I like to stretch that by putting my foot down and trying to drop my shoulder. See, I'm doing that same action, my shoulder past my knee, and I keep going with both shoulders down towards the ground. Now you want to try and get your shoulders on the ground, okay, if you can. Right now I'm not quite there, but usually if I stretch a lot I can do this. So this is one, like for me, I'm quite flexible in this particular range, okay. So down.
I might add, this really stirs up my hip joints, so I don't actually, well, I like the stretch, but I don't like it on my own body just because I do have some hip pathology, so I have to be very careful at how far I go into the range with this stretch, so I stay a bit more gentle and not do it for quite as long as the other stretches.
Yeah. Hip abduction is when you move, the ability to keep your knees apart, like the distance you can keep your knees apart in this direction. Okay, so that's useful in your guard retention. For example, if I wanted to pass under the legs, if Liv's leg goes wide, it's very hard for me to reach across. The more her knees are together, the easier it is for me to reach towards the far hip, which is a problem, okay? Another reason, anytime I want to turn Liv's hips, or like if I want to pass to one side by turning her to face the other way, how much her knees can go apart will determine how much I turn her. Because if I start to push and she puts her foot to the ground here, see the knees are quite far apart, Liv's got good hip abduction, I don't really get to turn her much. She can still sort of frame and face me to some degree, or use that to recover, okay? Whereas if her knees doesn't have good, she doesn't have good hip abduction, if her knees stay closer together, I get to turn her to here, okay? You can see her frame's going to be a lot worse here, and start to like work through that frame a lot better, okay? So we want to be able to stretch our hip abduction, which is basically the splits. Liv's much better at this than I am, again.
That's the second thing I'm better at.
That's right. So, I mean, you can do it like so. You know, you can sit down with it and start trying to move forward, like so.
You can do partner drills, look.
Yeah, partner drills are good. Yeah, we should do this one more actually. So I need to work this. So that's how we can work out hip abductors.
You can sleep like this.
Alright, next one.
Oh, and the froggy stretch like this. This is a good one too.
Yeah, I like to do it without the feet out actually, a lot of the time. Hip internal rotation. Okay, so that's the ability to put your knee in and your foot out. So we looked at hip, before we looked at hip external rotation when my foot comes in and knee goes out. Now we're going to look at hip internal rotation when my foot goes out and knee goes in. Okay, it's actually not so useful from guard. This one's much better for passing, okay, because what it allows for is for you to have wide base but still pinching in to control or pin with your knees, okay. For example, you know, in a headquarters position I might have wide legs but pinching my knees to control the leg, or you might do like a shin to shin to kind of pin a shin pin like this, foot wide, knee comes in. Without that range, often if we go back to the headquarters, I might have wide feet but inability to pinch, so I don't have control, or I might have to put narrow feet to get the pinch, and then I have poor balance, okay? So the way I like to stretch for hip internal rotation, if you can come against the wall and put your leg flat against the wall like this. I hope you can see here. So leg flat against the wall, facing this way at first, and then you're going to start turning, trying to face, you can use the wall to help if there's actually a wall there, but trying to face towards away from the wall, essentially, okay? Keeping your knee on the ground. And this should give your hip a good stretch. Potentially you might feel it in your knee as it twists the knee a bit, but you actually want to feel this more at the hip joint.
I don't mind. Do you ever stretch it like this? It might not be as good, but just make it sick.
Yeah, I find that hurts my knee a lot more.
Oh yeah, like there's a bit of strain on the medial.
Yeah, you feel that in your medial ligament.
But I do feel that in my hip as well.
Yeah, cool. Knee flexion. It's actually something that surprisingly is more important than you think, which is your ability to pull your foot towards your butt. Okay, especially in like preventing some of the passes. Now, actually, I think a lot of the time it can often be limited by how big your calf and hamstring are. That can be the block. But so I actually find like skinnier people tend to be able to like really jam their foot in a lot tighter. But it can be useful, obviously, you know, when we're passing, to be able to like sit back and lower sometimes.
Especially in closed guard as well.
Yeah. You'll see people in postures like this, and for your guard retention as well. So if Liv wants to come under my legs,
just go see.
Another bit, see. If she wants to go under this leg, if I can't put my just circle under. Yeah, like that, like to scoop it up. You know, I can't keep my heel to my butt. There's always going to be a space to do that, right? Or potential. if you get some people who can really jam that tight, I mean, you try to work underneath that gap, it's too difficult to get. Very different, like, you know, if I'm being very active with it, it's very different to get under that compared to like if it's here. Okay, not one you can work to, unless it's like a physical block. If you're stuck here, it's hard to kind of stretch through that. It's often just like your how much range you've got, you know, kind of actively.
I think people post knee injuries, such as like an ACL or MCL or ligamentous injuries, do struggle with their knee flexion, and it's something that you do have to actively stretch. If people have like a bony block or a meniscus that's getting stuck inside the knee, that's probably not a good thing to keep really stretching. But it's really person dependent. So anyway, this is not an injury prevention thing.
Just so you can practice it by sitting on your heels, basically, like this, or working towards that. All right. Foot flexibility. So this can help with foot locks and in also defending heel hooks and so on as well. So your ability to kind of point your toes like so. All right.
I think I can do that better too.
You can definitely do that better. So what that can do, so one, it should be harder. Like it requires more to get like a straight foot. Like I would need more range to be able to take that than someone who was kind of ended their range here. I can start to put pressure on the ligament there compared to having to go so far. But also, what having this ability to point your foot like this does is it almost changes the ability of me to expose the heel via the toes. So often what I look to do, if it lives like here, for example, it's now like, if you look at the line of the shin, then the toe, like this, which is actually the fulcrum, the toes are a little bit of a lever. If I work against the toes, it exposes the heel, it turns the heel out. Okay, but if it leaves foot points enough, when I push the toes, it doesn't really do that because it's in the same line of as the axis, so you don't as the fulcrum, so you don't actually get any rotation occurring. Okay, I could crack like someone like Craig's got really flexible toes. You'll often go to get like the toe strike here, and he's pointed so far that you often feel when you hit the toes, it does the opposite and actually rolls him in like this, as opposed to what you're wanting to do, which is, yeah, if you're more here, which is to expose the heel by pulling the toes outwards. It ends up, because he's so pointed, that you end up pulling the toes in and assisting with the escape. So how I like to stretch this is I just take my foot back, like kind of top of my big toe on the mat, and I will push my kind of grip over my forefoot, because not just the ankle, you want like your forefoot to stretch here like this. Okay, and I'll push down through that gap. You can't have your knee on the ground because then it kind of gets blocked. I want that floating, so it's like space to push my foot into to stretch. And
what about dorsiflexion? Or not so much?
Not so much. Maybe big toe flexion, I think, is important. Extension, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, which is something I don't really have. That's as far as my toes go. So good passing posture is extremely difficult for me.
Yeah, stretching your toes and your ability to sit back on your feet like this. Liv struggles with this, but it allows you to kind of pivot and move your knees around as you pass, which otherwise you're going to be quite flat-footed or kind of twinkle-toed. But it's
like me, because I'm old and arthritic. That's all I can do. This is hell for me.
Last one I talked about, lumbar and thoracic flexion. Often you don't actually want to be bending too much with your spine, but it can be a requirement, for example, in a north-south style recovery. So often my hip just bend, my hip flexion here, which we talked about earlier, is not enough. You need to be able to like curl your spine as well. So you can see my hips lifting up, which is my spine curling like this. Okay, now that allows my legs to start to work to facilitate in recovery. Okay, so how would you stretch that? I mean, you can do these back rolls and stretch like this, and basically try and put your feet on the ground. Just be careful, like doing a lot of repeated flexion through the spine can actually be detrimental to your spine. If you're doing it regularly, especially if you're resisting someone stacking you a lot, it's actually much better to try and keep your hips on the ground and your back in neutral posture, and be more flexible through your hips. So it's much better for injury prevention. But that said, to save your neck, generally the more flexible your thoracic and lower and your lumbar spine are, your lower back and your mid back, the more it can save your neck from a stack. So if lift starts to, actually you don't even have to, yeah, do it, might as well. So stack me. If my lower back and mid back are bent, as well as my hips and my feet have touched the ground, and my neck's actually still okay here, I can lift my head up. You can see I've got like plenty of, I don't have any tension through the neck. If I'm stiff through my lower back, then you can see like that. Yeah, go. You can see how quickly the pressure went to my neck here. See, I can't move my head, and it's really taking a lot of strain. Okay, so it's actually being able to be a bit more flexible through all of that lower chain relative to the neck is going to potentially prevent you getting strain on your neck. All right, so we just covered a hell of a lot of different types of mobility that I think are important. And each of those movements, I think you should practice passively and actively. So you're kind of like letting the ground and body weight stretch you, and sometimes you're kind of just trying to do the action without actually using anything to assist. So you're getting that range actively, and that's actually going to be, I think, in the end, more valuable. If you've got an excellent active range, you can be even more effective, which is definitely something I need to work on. So we're going to do a stretching section in a moment. I might put that as a separate video that you can just watch, and you can follow along as we do our stretches. But you should now understand the rationale for why we're doing each of these particular stretches. I hope you enjoyed this video. So you can use the code Lachlan10 and save 10% on any of my instructionals through BJJ Fanatics, and you can use the code Lachlan to save 30% on the Grappler's Guide. If you use these links, it also helps me out.